maybe we're at a different stage, but the story is the same.
Build a product that people love, and that's only possible if you really listen to local needs of those customers.
Having a lot of empathy with their specific problems builds a lot of trust, and that trust can be then harnessed to layer other products and solve newer problems.
Vertical SaaS is by definition finite market, right? Trust is of essence what's allowed us to grow as fast as we have.
The AI transition is service as a software. That addressable market probably measured not in billions, but in trillions.
Why you have the right to win.
Hey guys, great to have you here. Hey Andrés, hey Frank, hey Justo. This is a first for us. It's an experiment. It's the first time we have multiple guests in a Latitud podcast in this kind of roundtable format. The idea today is to basically deep dive in the core concept and the business of vertical SaaS companies, especially for Latin America. And we're honored to have the three of you here representing different verticals, if you want, and kind of slightly different markets. And the idea is to just learn from you and your complementary businesses. To begin with, let's start with a few quick introductions. If each of you could share a little bit on what your company does, in what vertical, in what market, and then maybe share a little bit of your past experience before you founded and started building these companies.
Andrés from Cometa. We're building the operating system for schools. Very quickly, we kicked off automating one of the key critical processes within the schools, which is collections. And now we're expanding beyond that, right? A bit about maybe in background, this is the second company that I built. I started an online coding bootcamp a few years ago, and now, fully devoted into building Cometa and again, building the operating system for schools.
Well, I'm Frank. I'm also a second-time entrepreneur. My first company was around table reservations and restaurants in LatAm. And this time we sold that company to TripAdvisor a couple of years ago. And I'm starting a new company, which is 18 months old. And we are doing an operating system for retailers. And we work with different type of retailers with a lot, very intensive in SKUs. So they sell basically products, and we're focused in Mexico.
Amazing. Great to have you here. Justo.
Justo from Fudo, and we are a vertical software focused on SMBs, restaurants, vertical in Latin America. And as Frank just defined it, we are kind of an operating system for SMB restaurants in Latin America. Born in Argentina, pretty quickly moved to Chile, but now operating also in Brazil and Mexico. And prior to Fudo, I spent almost 6 years in Mercado Pago. So basically, I worked with SMBs for quite some time now, before this in payments and launching and scaling the Mercado Pago Point business unit in Latin America. And prior to that, I also had one startup experience. I started a company called Prestario. It was basically a peer-to-peer lending company that this was back in 2010. So we tried and it didn't work, but it was a great experience as well. So here I am.
Great to have you all here. And we're proud investors with Latitud in the three companies. We just doubled down in Cometa's Series A. We're an investor in Fudo's large seed round and in PulpOS pre-seed round, seed round. So it's great to have you here and to be able to get deeper into this topic with all of you. We honestly think you are, even though you're portfolio founders, you're some of the three most knowledgeable people in the space in LatAm. So we're hoping to build interesting content for more founders to come after you and keep building kind of in this type of thesis. Okay, let's kick it off. Let's start with a very basic one. We're talking about vertical software, vertical SaaS. Let's assume for a second that someone is hearing this concept for the first time, right? I always say when we're talking about vertical SaaS, yes, clear, you're targeting a specific vertical, you're building software layering on other products. We'll talk about that. But that initial software can be very different from case to case, from vertical to vertical, the initial product, the initial modules. So I would love to get an initial kind of round of answers in terms of what vertical SaaS means for each of you. What's a key thing that differentiates a vertical SaaS from, say, an horizontal SaaS? Anyone that wants to take that one, feel free to jump in.
So for me, vertical SaaS, basically the definition of vertical SaaS versus horizontal SaaS is having some software that's solving for one specific vertical. That vertical could be, as in our case, restaurants, as in Frank's case, retail, or Andres's schools. And horizontal is basically solving for all verticals and trying to go more massive, let's say. What defines or the virtues of vertical SaaS is that you create a lot of trust with your client, and you understand a lot more the problems that they have, all the frictions that they have, and how to help them. So when you do that, you go so deep that any horizontal SaaS couldn't go that deep in the nuances of one specific business. So I think that would be a basic definition of vertical SaaS. And one thing that I'm sure that we're going to cover a lot is building trust with your client. So this know-how in one specific vertical, having a lot of empathy with their specific problems builds a lot of trust, and that trust can be then harnessed to, as you say, layer other products and solve newer problems. So that's my take.
Thanks, man. And Andres, Frank, would you agree in your cases, in your verticals, that trust is such a crucial component, or not necessarily? Maybe, Andres, you're like, no, we're just streamlining, pains. What would you say to Justo's concept?
I mean, I think trust is like a multiplier, right? Because as opposed to like maybe a horizontal product where you can tackle different industries and try to test out, if you build out the wrong reputation at the beginning, then that's really hard to recover from. Like, I think one of the things that we fundamentally did right at the beginning was really understanding what the customer needed and building without over promising what we were delivering. And that is what has allowed us to grow. Like today, and to Justo's point, like what has allowed us to grow as fast as we have is we built that trust, and that led to references. And vertical SaaS is by definition like a finite market, right? Like you're not talking about a horizontal software where, again, you can go into different verticals, right? The thought there is that by being verticalized, you can provide something substantially better than a horizontal software, right? But I completely agree with Justo's point. Like if trust is of essence, like it's something that you can definitely do being as focused as you are, but you can also do it wrong. And that's one of the key things that you have to avoid doing. And 100% agree. Like it's probably what has been what's allowed us to grow as fast as we have.
Yeah, in our particular case, Tommy, we consider we are the operating system of the businesses that partner with us. And that involves owning a lot of data gravity, right? Meaning we are kind of the system of record. We know how many products businesses have, how much they sell them for, which are the margins, etc. So beyond data gravity and workflow gravity, meaning you're the system that everyone else wants to integrate to make business with those businesses, that requires a lot of trust. And in many cases, the person who decides which point of sale or which system to operate with is the owner of the business. So trust is crucial in our case.
Frank, I got a question for you. You've been around the entrepreneurial ecosystem a bit longer than Andres and Justo. I'm not saying you're older. I'm just saying that maybe you've been a founder slightly before the guys were founders. Like, is vertical SaaS a new name for an old thing? Is a new tag? Or do you really think the possibility of building this type of software businesses is new in the world and/or in Latin America?
Well, I think this is kind of globally new. I mean, we had a big shift with cloud a couple of decades ago in the US, where software legacy on-premise legacy companies were challenged by the cloud, and well, software as a service was a new thing. That did not happen with the same intensity in LatAm as in the US. Yeah, it could be infrastructure. I mean, maybe lots of reasons. But even if you take a look at SaaS in the US, verticalization has not played out as a whole. Like, you find companies focused on restaurants like Toast, like it's the most iconic vertical for vertical SaaS. Like, very fragmented industry, lots of locations, not big concentrations, a big portion of the GDP. But just now, you're finding a lot of other companies doing vertical play in the US. So LatAm is very well behind that. Maybe the cycle is shortened and we are kind of skipping the cloud tectonic shift to jumping into the vertical SaaS. It's something that's definitely globally new, I think.
What did, in your mind, unlock vertical SaaS as a venture backable, venture scale type of businesses? Andres, Justo, I don't know if, what do you think are the key technological or infrastructure or capital differences or market differences that make vertical SaaS companies viable now that didn't make them viable 10 years ago, maybe?
So just to take what Frank said, yeah, I kind of think it's kind of an old thing with a new name. Just to answer your original question, in the sense that there's been vertical software around for some time. For example, in restaurants, you had on-premise software prior to this SaaS wave. But what changed, as Frank said, was the move to cloud. So when cloud appeared, also the SaaS business appeared, right? And SaaS is software as a service. So basically, instead of selling you an on-premise software, just a license in which typically it could only run in some specific hardware or with some specific requirements. And the business model was selling you a one-time license, and then you can or either like renew or get updates or buy other services. What happened with cloud was the business model changed and changed to a subscription business, right? So that's kind of the software as a service is always like spoken about like also as a subscription business. And to answer your question here is SaaS made it possible to distribute remotely and made it possible basically to be hardware agnostic, as in our case, for example. And that also involves a lot of the go-to-market strategy. So before you had to sell that license like face-to-face, one-to-one, with a typical like commercial cycle, probably longer. And now you can distribute to anyone, anywhere, and very efficiently, both in the distribution and also in the costs of maintaining that software. So it's basically trending to zero, right? Like the marginal cost of acquiring a new customer and maintaining a new customer is basically zero. So that I think that unlocked vertical SaaS. And as Frank mentioned, like in Latin America, the first wave of software, on-premise software, didn't happen in Latin America. At least didn't happen as it happened in the US. So kind of a greenfield for all the vertical SaaS or all the SaaS businesses in Latin America in these decades that will impact, as Frank said, in shorter cycles, right?
I do want to differentiate between vertical and horizontal SaaS companies in LatAm. In my mind, maybe you can address this, maybe not, but in my mind, there's also a big component of, as you many times layer on financial services on top of the vertical SaaS companies, like fintech infrastructure that is in place today that wasn't in place 5 years ago, even 5 years ago, I guess, Justo, no? Like, I don't know if that's something maybe you want to address, Andres, or we can touch upon that later.
The one thing that I would add is I completely agree. And of course, cloud services allowed that worldwide, right? But what I think is fundamental to be able to achieve this in Latin America is that, at least from what I've experienced traditionally, like selling SaaS or selling like a monthly fee to somebody is hard to do in Latin America. I think part of that is driven by just probably manual labor cost is very low as compared to the US or another developed country. So at the end, charging through like fintech layers, as I think Tommy, you were making reference, has been an enabler, at least for our business model, right? We're reliant in part with, like, for example, payments, right? So at the end of the day, what I think it has made this possible for us to make like a sustainable and profitable business model was the advance of like the financial infrastructure in Mexico. So yeah, I completely agree. Cloud, that's like and probably fintech is also an enabler across the developing world too. But for us, it's definitely been key to be able to develop like our vertical play in the school sector.
Cool, thanks, guys. I think that touching upon the horizontal versus kind of vertical in LatAm, and you were referring to it, Andres, right now. We have these Latitud WhatsApp groups, right, with fellows and the community. And someone asked in one of those groups a couple of months ago, hey, just to fellow founders, hey, do you know any SaaS company in LatAm that is doing 100 million or more of revenue just out of SaaS subscriptions, right? SaaS revenue, without accounting for fintech transactional revenues and so on, or marketplace revenues. And the question is, like, there's a few, of course, but you kind of found a ton of them that stayed in LatAm. You have some, on-premise ERPs of the past. You have a few new ones like Tienda Nube, Nubem Shop, the Shopify of LatAm. And then you have what? You have OutZero, right? The companies that started in LatAm, horizontal SaaS, if you want, that managed to win globally. In the case of OutZero, of course, it was acquired by Okta at 6.6 billion. But something that we've been discussing internally a lot at Latitud is, okay, for horizontal SaaS to be able to really win in LatAm, they might need to have a shot of winning globally, right? Or maybe not being player number one, but being one of the top players globally, right? We do think that Vertical SaaS, with all these kind of enablers that came up in the last 5-10 years, we do think that Vertical SaaS has a stronger moat, stronger local or regional defensibility than horizontal SaaS. I would love to hear your take on that, on those two parts of the question, and especially where do you think moats are in your company, in each of your company's case?
Sure. I think, it's very important to, as an entrepreneur, make sure that the industry you pick for building vertical SaaS has those local nuances, right? And it's very important that as a company, you're able to build a product that people love. And that's only possible if you really listen to local needs of those customers or those potential customers. Probably the way you distribute is different in Mexico than in the US, or in Mexico versus Brazil. The way or the integrations you build for taking payments is also different. In Mexico, you still find a lot of cash on the street versus you don't find that in Brazil. Or the way you close a deal with different types of customers according to its size. Those local nuances play a key role in how defensible your model is. And naturally, as an operating system, if you own data gravity, workflow gravity, and account gravity, you are enabled to build a lot of other opportunities around fintech or marketplace or procurement, or whatever comes to your appetite, that will require a local execution, right? We close most of our customers via WhatsApp, and that's common here in LatAm. We were very intense on WhatsApp usage, and we had to build our go-to-market around that. So that's probably something that's not really happening in the US.
That's great. You talked about data gravity, workflow gravity, and account gravity. Andres, Justo, what do you think makes vertical SaaS more defensible in LatAm? Maybe vertical SaaS having a especially better fit with SMEs and mid-market rather than enterprise potentially. I would love to hear about that too.
Three things that make especially like our kinds of businesses more defensible here in Latin America. One is the verticality, as you talked about. I think another one is the segment that you're targeting. It's a lot more difficult to target, for example, like brick and mortar merchants from the US or from Europe in Latin America or in another region than if you are located there, because those just imagine, like, by contrast, like HubSpot. Like, I think that all the companies of your portfolio use HubSpot, or a lot of them. Us as employees in a startup, like, we are aware of what are the best tools in the US, and we also, like, we can reach to them. We can speak in English. Like, we understand a lot of the things that are happening there, and it's a lot easier for us to adopt a software like HubSpot, for example, that is aimed at, let's call it, enterprise, right? But if you go more on brick and mortar, like more to the street, it's very difficult for an American company to learn how to talk to those kind of clients. So I think that is one very important. And the other one, so I talked about verticality, about the segment, and the other one, Frank mentioned it somehow, there is infrastructure. So building infrastructure in Latin America is really a pain for anyone. And foreign people like tend to think that Latin America is like one giant country, and it's actually like a lot of different countries, and you have to build for each country. If, for example, payments, you want to be an acquirer, you want to be a PSP, you have to build infrastructure for each country. And when you see, like, once a Square or a Toast, and they see this problem, like, they say, I don't know if I want to build, like, for me, going to the UK or going to Australia makes a lot more sense, a larger market. And if I have to build for one market, I'd rather build there. So I think that one is another mode. And it's not only like payments infrastructure, but also integrations, for example, to, I don't know, invoicing services, or delivery apps in our case, or accounting softwares, and everything that is really localized. So I think those three things really make a moat for a foreign company to enter Latin America.
Great, thank you. Andres, any thoughts around this topic of defensibility?
I agree with that, but into that, and one of the key things, and this is true for any vertical SaaS, is that you have to be involved in one of the critical processes, right? Because if not, at the end of the day, like, to Justo's point, like, if you're doing the invoicing, if you're doing those kind of things that are very critical within like the business, then you are harder to replace, right? But the key thing there is being involved in like a critical process within that business. And yeah, also I think, like, when I think about my ICP, is they're not going to be looking like at Google consistently to see what are the best trends of different solutions that they can use, right? So at the end of the day, once you acquire them, and acquiring them is the tough part. And I think distribution is probably the toughest thing in Latin America, because you have to start thinking of how to do, and it's always like a mix of online with offline, right? And so I think that probably like the higher barrier here is to acquire customers, but once you're acquired them, it's a lot harder for you to be replaced based on like the typical SME profile of owner, right?
Amazing, and I guess we'll touch upon go to market later, but I guess as you layer on more and more products, that should make you more sticky, right? And retain more and more of those customers that you originally had such a hard time acquiring, right? The next question gets kind of into the core of the vertical SaaS playbook, if you want, right? Which any listener can find more information about it on the internet. There's a few funds in the US that famously invested a lot, and of course you can look at Toast, look at Block. I would love to hear from you as much kind of tactically. Walk us through a little bit of, okay, what was the core, that wedge module for you initially within your vertical, and what additional kind of layers of products you will be adding on top of it, right? So I kind of touched upon this in the beginning. It's simple to say vertical SaaS, but every software for every vertical is usually different. You see a lot of procurement software. We see a lot of kind of more inventory management software. And then on top of it, maybe the playbook gets a bit more similar in terms of layering on different products. But I would love to hear now a little bit about each of your companies in terms of how that playbook roadmap looks like now and into the future.
For us, what's been super critical and our priority since we started the company is to become the operating system. That means that you need to make sure they use you for mostly everything. That any product they sell is inputted in your system, that any product they buy is also there, and that the whole business is at a data level in your system. That's been for us super critical before, trying to do fintech or payments or loans or trying to add value through an app to its employees or getting into procurement. For us, that's what's been super critical. Be the operating system.
It seems in your case, operating system, there's a lot around inventory management, right? From what I understand.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of inventory management, and there's a lot of offline information. Like you go to one of our ICP stores, and there are a bunch of products. I mean, hanging around multiple shelves in a store, and sometimes, in some cases, the owner does not know how many products or money in inventory the business has. So lots of offline information and lots of different places the data is non-digitalized. In many cases, in other cases, it's digitalized in very old or legacy systems or spreadsheets, etc. So to us, it was critical to build a solution that was facilitating managing the business online in the cloud, importing the inventory through a spreadsheet, or even we offer our customers inputting the inventory from pictures they take from their paper notes, etc. So that has been our focus in building a very sticky product they use. And well, I think we achieved that in terms of usage, in terms of, how many hours our customers put on PulpOS per day, an average 4 hours per day. They use it 4 hours per day. So the second priority was distribution. So how can this product be distributed easily and adopted easily? That's also very challenging. So everything we did was prioritizing that stickiness is around and adoption is around. And when you get into that, we realized we had to have invoicing on board and as part of our product. We realized we had to develop a very simple way for them to import the products. And everything that was functional to that mission, we did it. But we wanted to run payments, but it was not as critical as we thought. I mean, there's so many payments players in LatAm in a race for TPV that optionality is there for them. So we're not prioritizing that in the stage of our company. We would love to, because Toast and Justo can probably illustrate this very well, has figured out to quintuple their revenues with payments or fintech, but we're not at that stage yet.
Amazing. Thanks, Frank. Justo, you want to tag along to that?
Okay. Maybe we're at a different stage, but the story is the same. So I think that first of all, you have to be really good and solve really good what you're solving for. In our case, is the operational side and the back office of a restaurant. And basically, when I say operation, is all what the employees do, and back office is all the inventory, all the costing. So you can think of a pyramid. So you got the basic needs. So if you don't solve for the basic needs, it makes no sense to launch a new product on top of that. And I think that what Frank just talked about is maybe referring to that. In our case, I think we already had solved 80 or 90% of the problems of our target segment. And instead of moving up market to a new segment and start developing that core product for a new segment, we chose to develop payments. And I think it's important not only because of the monetization, but also in our business, you can add value with payments. It's not just the commodity of processing the payment, but in our case, it is also like an operational tool. So in the case of, you can imagine like the case of Toast, or our case, the waiter going to the table and managing all the table from a terminal, that at the end of all the whole operation, all the wholesale and taking care of that table, they can process the payment from the same terminal. And then you have some custom made features. So that gives us like really the right to win, in the sense that we're customizing payments for our business. And it's just not just like a war for a commodity. And I think it's important that you think about your second or third product, why you have the right to win. But again, like you really have to solve the core needs of the merchant in our case, to start layering another product, because if not, it's like Fran said, it makes no sense to launch payments if you don't have invoicing, right?
Super clear. Thank you. Andres, how do you see this in your business working with schools in Mexico?
Yeah, so one of the things that we thought about was, and this is a strategy question, right? But we wanted to get into like a core function of the business, like covering like a critical process. So that for us was key. And I think it's key for any vertical SaaS. And then after that, and what we managed, and I think it was, maybe that's a privilege that not everybody has, but finding one that has a high ACV, and then build on top of that, right? The negative or the downside to doing that is that probably there was a bit more friction in terms of distribution at the beginning. Fundamentally, I think it was the right decision, because we were covering something that was so critical for us. The first point was collections, right? So having your entire revenue go by you, it's easy as compared to move from like a core process, like taking like collections and managing revenue, into other additional processes that a school can run, right? So when we thought about it, and when we thought deeper as well, it was, you also had getting in collections, you had a bit of a data advantage, because if you think about it, to be in collections, you have to touch, in our case, the parent. You also have to have information of the student, and you end up having information about like how much revenue is coming in, what other providers do they sell. So it was like a very unique entry point in terms of data to then build on top of that, right? Plus, we were already having communication with the family, so there's a lot of things that make it very easy to layer on top, whether it's going to be like a vertical banking marketplace or communication, and a lot of things that are traditionally thought as like key components of like a vertical SaaS play, right? But for us, collections enabled all of those different critical workflows out of school. So we thought it was like a very unique entry point.
Love it. Exemplifies this point of vertical SaaS being a different beast, like vertical per vertical, right? And market per market. So that's cool. So we've been talking about enabling technologies, leapfrogging technologies. We've been talking about databases as modes, and of course, a super cycle of artificial intelligence, right? And so your companies have slightly different kind of ages. Fudo was definitely born before the kind of chat GPT-3, Cometa slightly around that time, maybe PulpOS a bit later. I would love to hear, how do you think this AI wave basically empowers or threatens the vertical SaaS play, especially for your companies, but if you want even beyond yours, right? Do you think that AI will basically help you just launch more layers products, go deeper into the value you're generating for your clients? Or do you think that it will be easier for small teams, maybe not even in your home markets, to build very customized software for any niche customer segment out there? Would love to hear your thoughts.
The cloud transition was software as a service. Software companies became cloud service providers. And this was a huge opportunity 20 years ago, probably in the US. And today, thanks to the agentic reasoning and to how the systems perform to very complex conversations, the AI transition is service as a software. This means that software companies turn labor into software. And that addressable market is not the software market, but the services market, which is probably measured not in billions, but in trillions. And that's a big threat to all companies, even to startups like we are, where we are supposed to be the new kids challenging legacy players. A couple of examples for that is that, like the open table example that Justo just gave. If someone's selling, and every vertical and industries has its own nuances, but if there's an agent picking up the phone of every restaurant taking phone reservations, probably the volume of reservations it would get is very similar to the reservations Open Table is getting. So it has a big advantage, or they have an edge to get into an old players market. Another example is CRM. Like AI has demonstrated to interpret large amounts of data and structured data so well that I read a case where there's a company building a CRM with employees not needing to input any type of data to the system. Like you just give access to employees' emails and the system interprets all that information and builds an entire CRM where probably a Salesforce implementation would take weeks or months to do that. So I think AI has tremendous capabilities that we still don't see them in action, since many apps and companies are being born these days for tackling all incumbents markets.
The TAM becomes a payroll of the workforce, basically, the total addressable market.
Yeah, I come from the restaurant space, and I'm super close with Justo at Fudo. There's a very emblematic example recently of Open Table integrating an AI solution for taking phone calls and making reservations on behalf of the restaurants. I mean, most of the reservations are still made by phone. So if there's a startup executing that better than Open Table, probably that's a great surround and expand strategy for a startup to take Open Table's place. I mean, super emblematic. I'm not sure. I mean, if I'm deliberating about this, but even new tech companies had to be careful around AI threats if they're not using AI as their core value prop. Yeah.
Andres, you want to mix things up?
A few things I've been thinking about AI. The first thing is that, and I think there's been like presence of like there's vertical SaaS that have existed like on premise, whatever. We've talked about that before, right? One of the issues when you're competing against those legacy players is that they offer a lot of things. Maybe they don't do them that well, but they offer them, right? And sometimes clients are going to prefer a full solution as opposed to like one that does a few things really well, right? AI is going to just allow us to create more and faster. So that's going to be able to put us and allow us to be that like command center for whichever industry you're tackling, right? A lot quicker than before, right? So now speed is even more important than it was before based on AI. And then the other factor is that you can, in vertical SaaS, we have like better data than the traditional horizontal SaaS, right? So if you're using that to your advantage, then that just allows you to leapfrog in front of the rest, right? So I think there's a key part of data that is going to play a more important role in vertical SaaS, and is going to allow like our specific solutions to be more important than say like in a horizontal solution.
Cool. We agree. Justo, what do you think?
It's a difficult question that I think that all of us like think a lot about it. But if you like rewind 2 years ago, I think it was like exactly end of 2022 or 2021, 2021, right? When ChatGPT was kind of publicly launched. I think all of us thought that it would definitely like change the world in months, right? Like robots should be like walking down the street right now and everything should be driven by AI. Fast forward to today and not much has changed, right? So although I think that you cannot like minimize the impact that AI will have on this super cycle that is coming, I think that we also like overestimated the speed on which it would like impact all of our businesses. Having said that, I think that today AI changed a lot more on the internal processes of the companies. We use it a lot on support. We use it a lot on sales and go to market. We even are using and experimenting with Darwin, another portfolio company, right? And Latitude portfolio company. The challenge is finding where to integrate it or in your core product. So and still a bit premature, especially in when you're talking to brick and mortar merchants, restaurant owners, or like small retailers. You're still like fighting to educate them on how to use correctly their inventory and costing. So it's just like science fiction trying to make them understand how AI will impact their really traditional businesses. But there are some use cases, as Frank said, like for example, reservations in restaurants is important. Then having also like maybe a sales agent for your online ordering. And I think that we are, at least in our case, the challenge is being like a pre-AI wave company, not like be completely asleep on this and trying to also like evolve and start using AI and start integrating these kind of different use cases and also like educating our team on this new technology. I think this is more of a challenge that if you are an AI native company, right? So it's difficult. It's difficult to say how it's gonna impact our business.
I think our perspective, at least, is one of the keys is what Andres said, right? Like you have this vertical deep databases of all this customers you acquired in this specific segment, and I think that you'll be able to leverage that for multiple, not only chatbots, not only externally facing agents, but you're saying, okay, how you allocate your inventory, just those predictive models. Eventually, for kind of generative AI underwriting, when you get into lending, if you do get into lending for working capital loans for your clients, right? So, I think it's still early days, as you say.
Maybe just to build on top of what Frank and Justo said, and I was thinking more about, and this is something that's just like the impact of AI, and like we were born right before like the AI boom, right? And the way I see it, there's a step function, right? We have to, and I think all of us are doing the first part, which is you have to develop AI within your internal processes, right? Whether it's customer support, sales. And I think that's something that has to be company wide, right? Like everybody has to be using AI. And I think it's an existential threat as an employee. Like if you're not using AI, you're going to be left behind. And the same is true for you as a company. And I think the next step is to like really start using AI for things that are customer facing solutions, right? So over time, like the thing that I think, and when I think of how to do it, is the first thing is like everybody in our company has to be using AI, or again they're going to be left behind. And that is, how can we start using AI in front of our customers? And I think we are starting to explore the second part, right? But that is essential, and I think it's an existential threat for all of our businesses.
Amazing, we agree. Great, guys. It was amazing to have all of you here. Thanks for making the time. Thanks for being guinea pigs in this experiment of this roundtable around Vertical SaaS. I hope this episode will be listened by many founders in the upcoming years, trying to build vertical solutions with software and AI and financial services in Latin America. And again, it's been an honor to have you here and to partner up with you and your companies with Latitud. Muchas gracias.
Thanks, Tommy.
Gracias, Tommy.